Before beginning the story, I'd like to say a big thank you for visiting my new channel. I'm going to be uploading alternate history-related stories every single day. If that sounds good, be sure to leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. It means a whole lot when just getting started. I hope you enjoy the story. I want to start with the scar because that's what started it for me. It's on my left forearm, about 3 inches long, running at a slight diagonal from just below my elbow toward my wrist, pale and fully healed, the kind of scar that's been there long enough to become part of the furniture. When I first noticed it, I pressed my thumb against it the way you do when you're confirming something is real, and it was real. It had texture and history and the slight shininess that old scars get. It was completely and undeniably a scar that had been on my arm for years. I had never seen it before in my life. My name is Tess Mabry. I run a one-woman plumbing operation out of Carver Falls, which is the kind of town that has 1 of everything you need and 2 of nothing. I've lived here my whole life except for 2 years in my 20s when I tried a city and decided I wasn't built for it. I own a house on the north end of Ridgecroft Road. I drive a white truck with my name on the door, and I know my own body the way anyone who works with their hands knows theirs, which is to say completely, practically, without sentiment. I know where every scar came from. I know where every old injury aches when the weather changes. The scar on my left forearm did not have an origin. It was just there on a Tuesday morning, as present and established as my name. I stood in the bathroom, looking at it for a while. I pulled out my phone and looked through every photo I had of myself, going back 2 years, and in none of them was the scar visible. I thought about whether I could have simply missed it, the way you miss something familiar, and the answer was no. I change out my work shirt every morning, and I've rolled up the left sleeve 10,000 times. I would have noticed. I went to work because I had a full day, and scars don't stop pipes from leaking. But I kept looking at it all day between jobs, at red lights. 3 inches of healed tissue that had no business being on my arm. The photograph on the fridge I noticed that evening. It was held up by a magnet I'd had for years, a flat blue square from a hardware supplier, in the same spot where I sometimes stick reminders or take out menus. The photo showed me standing on a beach I didn't recognize with a woman I'd never met. Both of us squinting into the sun with the relaxed posture of people who were having a good time somewhere warm. I looked happy in it. The woman next to me had her arm around my shoulder and was laughing at something off camera. I took it down and looked at the back. Nothing written on it. I put it back up because I didn't know what else to do with it, and I made dinner and sat at my kitchen table and thought about the scar and the photo together, which felt different from thinking about either one separately. 2 things that belonged to a life lived in this house by someone with my face. I slept badly. The neighbor was the 3rd thing. His name is Ponder, which is what everyone calls him. I don't know if it's a first name or a last name, and I've never asked. He lives 2 houses down, and we have the kind of relationship that small towns produce naturally. A wave and a nod, and occasionally a few sentences about the weather or the road condition on the south end of Ridgecroft. That's it. That's the whole thing. Comfortable and shallow. The way good neighbor relationships often are. Wednesday morning, I was loading my truck and Ponder came by walking his dog, and he stopped and asked me how my mother was doing. I told him my mother had been dead for 6 years. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't immediately read, somewhere between confused and careful. He said he was sorry. He'd thought she was visiting. He'd seen me talking with an older woman in my driveway earlier in the week. I told him he must have been thinking of someone else. He nodded slowly in the way that means the opposite of agreement and walked on with his dog. My mother has been gone for 6 years. I don't have an older woman in my life who visits regularly. There was nobody in my driveway earlier in the week because I've been on a long job in the next county and I've been leaving before first light every day. I sat in my truck without starting it for about 5 minutes. Then I drove to work because I still had a full day, and because the practical forward motion of a schedule is one of the few reliable tools I've found for managing the feeling that the ground isn't quite where your foot expects it. Over the next week, I started cataloging. I didn't write anything down. I just kept a running count in my head, which is how I manage most things. The scar, the photograph, Ponder's question, a coffee mug on my shelf I didn't recognize that had the specific worn look of something used daily for years, a throw blanket on my couch that wasn't mine but looked entirely at home on my couch, a contact in my phone under a name I didn't recognize, Darla W., no last name, with 3 short texts in the thread that were in my own writing and said things I wouldn't say. None of it was dramatic. That was the thing that kept making me doubt myself. It wasn't my house rearranged or my life unrecognizable. It was just a small, persistent layer of wrong sitting on top of everything right. The way a window screen slightly out of its frame changes the view just enough to notice. I called my friend Nola, who is the person I call when I need to think out loud at someone patient. I described it to her without editorializing, just the list, the scar, the photo, the neighbor, the mug, the blanket, the texts. Nola was quiet for a moment and then said, "Are you sleeping okay?" I told her I was sleeping fine, that this wasn't a tired and confused situation, that I knew my own arm. She said she believed me that I was sure, but what was my theory? I didn't have one yet. I told her that. She said to call her when I did. I drove the long route home that evening through the south end of the county, the way I sometimes do when I want to think without arriving too quickly. And somewhere on that drive, I had a thought that I couldn't put back once I'd had it. The wrongness wasn't mine. None of the wrong things felt like things that had happened to me or changed around me. They felt like things that had come with someone, imported. Like when someone moves into a house and their furniture changes the feel of the rooms even when it mostly fits. The wrong details had a consistency to them. They cohered the way details cohere when they belong to a single history, just not mine. Someone else's small life had pressed itself against mine, and some of it had come through. I started thinking about the job. 3 weeks before the Tuesday of the scar, I'd done a service call out at an old property on the county road, a farmhouse that a woman named Sula had been slowly fixing up for about a year. Sula was the kind of client I like, practical and undemanding. She knew what she wanted and didn't hover. The job was a straightforward drain issue in the basement. I'd been down there for about 2 hours working in the way you work in old basements, with good light and focused attention and the particular patience that bad old plumbing requires. While I was down there, I'd had a strange moment, a brief and total sense of being looked at, very specific and directional, from the far corner of the basement where my work light didn't reach well. I'd looked over, seen nothing, and gone back to work. I'd filed it under old house energy and moved on. I thought about that moment now, and it landed differently. I started asking around about Sula's property carefully, the way you ask about things in a small town when you want information without advertising that you're looking for it. What I found was straightforward and strange in equal measure. The property had been vacant for about 8 years before Sula bought it. Before that, it had belonged to a woman who lived there alone and who had, according to the general understanding of people who remembered her, simply walked away one day and not come back. No forwarding address, no explanation, no contact with anyone she'd known in Carver Falls afterward. The woman's name was not available in casual conversation, so I went to the county records office and looked up the deed history and found it. The name on the deed before Sula's was mine, not similar to mine, not a relative with a shared surname. My full name, Tess Mabry, with an address that was my address on Ridgecroft Road. I sat in the county records office parking lot for a long time after that. What I'd put together by then was this. There was a version of my life somewhere that had gone differently enough to land in a different place. Different enough that whoever that version was, she'd ended up at that farmhouse and lost something there, the way you can lose a thread completely if enough things pull against it. And when she'd lost it, she'd found the nearest available version of her own life, which was mine, and she'd pressed herself against it, and some of her had come through. The scar, the photograph, the blanket, the mug, small pieces of a life looking for the life they belonged to. And she'd been in my driveway, talking to Ponder's impression of an older woman, which meant she was visible somehow, present enough to be seen, working her way in. The overlap was tightening. I could feel it the way you feel a slow leak, not dramatic, just the persistent awareness that something is going in a direction that ends badly if you don't address it. I drove out to Sula's property on a Thursday evening. I told Sula I'd noticed something with the basement drain on my last visit and wanted to check it hadn't developed into anything, which was thin but plausible enough. She let me in, and I went down to the basement, and this time I took my work light all the way to the far corner. She was there, not threatening, not monstrous, just there, standing in the corner of an old basement in the specific posture of someone who has been waiting in a small space for a long time. She looked like me the way a photograph looks like the person in it. The shape of my face, my height, my hands, my haircut had a slightly different length. She was wearing work clothes that match mine in style, but not in the specific worn pattern of mine. We looked at each other. I want to tell you I had a speech prepared. I didn't. I had a list of things I'd lost that she hadn't earned, and a feeling in my chest that was more complicated than anger, because it's hard to be simply angry at something that is your own face wearing grief. She didn't look like a threat. She looked like someone who was very tired and had been making do for a long time with diminishing resources. I said her life wasn't here. I said I understood what it was to lose something and not know how to stop reaching for it. I said that what she was doing, pressing into my life and consolidating it piece by piece, wasn't going to give her back what she'd lost. It was going to cost me what I had while she tried. She didn't speak, but something in her posture changed. The held quality of it, the coiled patience, like a slow exhale. I started talking about my life, not to her exactly, more like thinking out loud in her direction. I talked about the specific history of the house on Ridgecroft Road, the water heater I'd replaced myself 4 years ago, and the particular aggravation of that job. The crack in the third porch step that I'd been patching with the wrong compound for 2 years because I kept buying the wrong kind. The way the light comes through the east window in early morning and hits the floor in a rectangle that the cat I used to have would lie in for hours. The cat's name was Spool, and she'd been gone for 3 years, and I missed her in the small, steady way you miss things that were good and quiet and didn't ask much. None of this was dramatic. It was just specific. The unglamorous, particular truth of a life lived in one place by one person who knew every corner of it. I talked for a while. The other Tess got thinner. That's the only word I have for it. Not physically, more like the way a radio signal fades when you move out of the range. The solidity of her presence in the corner of that basement became less certain. She didn't disappear dramatically. She just gradually stopped being the most real thing in the room. I drove home. The correction happened slowly, the way good corrections do. The coffee mug disappeared from my shelf over the following week. Not all at once. More like it stopped being there one morning, and I couldn't say exactly when. The throw blanket, the contact in my phone. Ponder stopped referencing the older woman in my driveway and went back to weather and road conditions. The photograph came down from the fridge on its own, or I took it down and don't remember doing it, or both. The woman in it, laughing at something off camera on a beach I'd never been to. I've thought about her. Whatever version of my life she belonged to is gone now, and she doesn't know it. She thinks she has a friend who is fine somewhere. I'm fine somewhere. I held on to that. The scar didn't go away. I check every morning when I roll up my left sleeve, and it's still there. Same 3 inches, same diagonal, same pale finish. I've made my peace with it. It's the price of the overlap, I think. Some part of her history that rooted too deeply to correct. I've stopped trying to find where it came from. I've started treating it the way I treat my other scars, practically, as information about something that happened once. What I haven't made my peace with is the vacation. The beach in that photograph, the warm light and the squinting and the woman with her arm around my shoulder. I've never been to a beach like that. I haven't taken a real vacation in 4 years because I've been building the business and there's always a reason to stay. But I remember it. Not the whole thing, just pieces. The sound of that specific water, the smell of the sunscreen, the easy feeling of a day with nowhere to be and someone I was glad to be next to. I remember it with the texture of something I actually lived, not something I saw in a photo, and the memory doesn't feel borrowed or wrong when it surfaces. It feels like mine. I don't know what to do with that. I've thought about it on long drives and between jobs and late at night when the house is quiet. I think about the other Tess and where she came from and what she lost and whether the life she had before it fell apart was better than mine in some specific ways that she left behind in me when she receded. The scar is on my arm. The vacation is in my memory. The cat's name was Spool, and she's still gone and I still miss her. I hold on to what I know is mine, and I do the work, and I come home to a house that is my house in every way I can verify. Most mornings, that's enough. Some mornings I stand at the east window and watch the light come in and hit the floor in its usual rectangle, and I think about a beach I've never been to and feel something I can't name for someone I've never met, and I wonder if she got somewhere. I hope she got somewhere.